The Galactic Coalition had been watching Earth for years. To them, it was a curiosity, a planet rich in untapped resources, inhabited by a species that still relied on outdated technology and primitive methods. The Coalition, with its vast array of advanced civilizations, considered the human race beneath their notice. Earth's jungles, in particular, were mocked. Dense, humid, and teeming with wildlife, these wilderness areas were deemed useless, unsophisticated relics of a bygone era. Commanders within the Galactic Coalition spoke openly of their plan to claim Earth, laughing at the simplicity of it. They were certain that once they landed with their energy weapons, exosuits, and drones, it would be over within days. Earth's military, with its outdated ballistic weapons and dependence on the terrain, would be nothing more than an annoyance. Their vast technological superiority would make this operation a mere formality. The invasion began with all the confidence one would expect from a force that had never known failure. Dropships descended upon Earth's wilderness, and entire battalions of alien soldiers, each one encased in their sleek, armor-plated exosuits, moved into the dense jungles with a mechanical precision. Scanners and drones flew overhead, detecting movement, mapping the terrain, and sending live feeds back to the commanders on board their orbiting ships. There was no anticipation of difficulty, only victory. The commanders observed from their high-tech war rooms, smirking as their troops advanced into the unknown. "It's just a forest," one of them said, tapping on the holographic map of the jungle. "No challenge at all." They didn't understand the terrain. To them, it was just another obstacle that their superior technology would quickly overcome. As the Galactic soldiers moved deeper into the jungle, their confidence only grew. Their scanners picked up signs of wildlife, animals skittering in the underbrush, birds flying overhead, but no human activity. It was as if the humans had fled, abandoning the jungle to the invaders. One commander chuckled to himself. "Cowards!" he muttered. The jungle, however, had its own rules, and Earth's special forces were not the type to fight on alien terms. These soldiers had been trained in the harshest environments, and Earth's wilderness was their home. For days they had been watching the skies, preparing for the invasion they knew was coming. They moved silently through the trees, blending into the foliage, using every inch of the terrain to their advantage. The Galactic soldiers, for all their technological might, were ill-prepared for what was coming. Their exosuits, designed for battle on open fields or urban warfare, began to struggle in the thick, humid air of the jungle. The advanced drones, which had been so effective in open space, found it difficult to navigate the dense canopy, crashing into branches and losing signal in the thick foliage. Communications between squads began to falter, and the once clear-cut operation turned into a chaotic advance into unknown territory. Still, the commanders pushed their troops forward, too proud to consider retreat. "Move faster," one barked into the comms. "We'll flush them out. They can't hide forever." But it wasn't about hiding. The special forces weren't running, they were waiting. Every soldier knew the jungle like the back of their hand, every tree, every river, every hiding spot. They had spent weeks fortifying the area, setting traps, creating choke points. And now, as the Galactic forces stumbled through the underbrush, the humans made their move. It started small. One moment, a squad of Galactic soldiers was walking in formation, the next, an explosion rocked the ground, sending half the squad flying. The rest scrambled to regroup, only to find themselves caught in a hail of bullets from unseen attackers. Panic set in. These weren't mindless animals they were facing, these were trained warriors who knew the jungle better than anyone. From the commander's vantage point, the first attack seemed random. They assumed it was wildlife, or some environmental hazard they had overlooked. But as the reports started flooding in, squads being picked off one by one, drones failing to return, exosuits malfunctioning in the heat, it became clear that this wasn't a natural phenomenon. This was warfare, and the humans were the ones in control. Still, the commanders refused to believe that their superior forces could be bested by a bunch of primitives hiding in the jungle. "Send reinforcements," they ordered. "Crush them." But the more troops they sent, the more they lost. Earth's special forces didn't fight like the alien armies were used to. They didn't march in formation, they didn't engage in open combat. Instead, they struck from the shadows, using the jungle itself as their ally. They knew every sound, every scent, every movement in the trees. And the Galactic soldiers, for all their advanced technology, were blind in this environment. For the first time, the Galactic commanders began to doubt their success. The invasion, which had seemed so simple, was turning into a nightmare. Earth's jungles were no longer just an obstacle, they were a battleground. And the humans weren't just an annoyance, they were a threat. The Galactic soldiers, once confident in their technology and firepower, quickly found themselves at a loss. As they trudged deeper into the jungle, the terrain began to work against them. The thick canopy blocked out their drones, and their advanced equipment started to fail. The humidity caused sensors to malfunction, and their sophisticated communication systems, designed for use in open space or planetary cities, struggled to cut through the dense, oppressive air. It wasn't long before the first ambush struck. A squad of heavily armored alien soldiers moved cautiously through the underbrush, their weapons drawn and scanners sweeping the area for any signs of human activity. They didn't expect what came next. A hail of bullets erupted from the trees, targeting weak points in their armor, and explosions ripped through the ground as carefully placed mines detonated beneath their feet. Before they had a chance to react, half the squad was down, and the rest were scrambling for cover, shouting commands into their failing comms. The special forces weren't relying on brute strength or advanced weaponry. They didn't need to. They had the jungle. Years of training in these exact conditions had prepared them for this moment. Every ambush was carefully planned, every movement calculated. They knew exactly where the enemy would step, how they would react, and they used the terrain to their full advantage. The Galactic soldiers, used to fighting in organized lines and depending on their tech, were helpless in the face of such tactics. When the survivors of the ambush tried to regroup, they found themselves lost. The jungle was unlike anything they had ever experienced. It was alive, unpredictable, and far too vast to control. Their mapping drones couldn't penetrate the thick canopy, and their navigation systems, built for urban or open environments, failed in the wild, twisting paths of the jungle. The Galactic commanders, watching the chaos unfold from their orbiting ships, couldn't believe what they were seeing. Every attempt to reinforce their soldiers was met with more losses. The humans weren't engaging in open combat. They were striking from the shadows, disappearing before the aliens had a chance to retaliate. The alien soldiers, still arrogant in their belief that they were superior, began to falter. They had come expecting a quick, clean victory, but instead, they were being hunted. Every step they took was dangerous. Every tree could be hiding an enemy, every bush a trap. As they tried to press forward, they were met with more ambushes. Hidden snipers picked off stragglers from the treetops, and squads found themselves lured into dead ends, where they were systematically eliminated. The Galactic Army, with all its power and technology, was being decimated by an enemy they couldn't see. Their armor, designed to withstand energy blasts and plasma weapons, was useless against the precision strikes of the human snipers, who knew exactly where to aim. Their exosuits, meant to enhance speed and strength, became liabilities as they malfunctioned in the humidity, overheating and slowing their movements. The jungle itself seemed to be fighting alongside the humans. Branches and vines tangled around the soldiers' legs, slowing their advance. Insects and animals, disturbed by the presence of the invaders, added to their misery. The Galactic forces had never faced anything like this. And through it all, the humans remained invisible. The special forces operated in complete silence, communicating through hand signals and using their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver their enemies. They were ghosts in the jungle, striking and then vanishing before the aliens even knew what hit them. The Galactic commanders, in their desperation, sent out more troops, but it only led to more losses. The alien soldiers were beginning to break. Their confidence, once unshakable, was eroding with every step they took deeper into the wilderness. Reports of casualties flooded in. Commanders barked orders into their comms, but the transmissions were garbled, cutting in and out. Frustration grew as more soldiers went missing. Some were picked off by snipers, others fell into traps, and some simply disappeared into the jungle, never to be seen again. The galactic forces were no longer fighting to win, they were fighting to survive. The jungle, once mocked as primitive, had become their worst nightmare. It was a living entity that swallowed them whole, a place where their technology was useless, and their tactics were obsolete. The galactic soldiers, who had arrived on Earth expecting an easy conquest, were now the hunted. Fear began to spread through the ranks of the galactic forces as the jungle seemed to close in around them. Every rustle in the leaves, every distant sound became a threat. The soldiers, once proud and confident in their advanced technology, were now gripped by a growing sense of paranoia. They couldn't see their enemy, and the jungle, which they had once mocked, became their tormentor. The humans used this fear to their advantage. They knew that psychological warfare was just as effective as any bullet. The special forces had learned how to manipulate their environment to create confusion and terror. They left misleading trails, sounds of movement just out of sight, shadows that played tricks on the mind. The galactic soldiers, trained for direct combat in high-tech battles, had no experience with this kind of warfare. They were used to facing enemies who could be detected, tracked, and overwhelmed with firepower. But here, in the depths of Earth's wilderness, they faced an enemy that refused to engage on their terms. As the alien soldiers marched forward, they found themselves disoriented, their scanners providing false readings, their communication systems failing to keep them connected. When they tried to regroup, they realized they were being led into traps, forced into narrow, confined spaces where their numbers were meaningless. Panic started to set in. Groups of soldiers, separated from the main force, began to lose their nerve. Without clear orders or a way to contact their commanders, they became vulnerable, easy targets for the human ambushes that followed. The jungle itself amplified the sense of isolation. The dense foliage blocked out the sky, and the towering trees turned every path into a maze. The galactic soldiers, bred and trained in sterile environments where technology provided every solution, were now at the mercy of the untamed wilderness. Their advanced weapons, while powerful, required line of sight, which the jungle refused to give them. And so, they stumbled forward, trying to make sense of a world that defied all their training. Meanwhile, the special forces moved with quiet precision. They knew the jungle, its rhythms, its sounds. They didn't need drones or scanners. They had spent years mastering this environment. They watched as the alien forces fell into confusion, exploiting every weakness, every moment of hesitation. The galactic soldiers, once fierce and determined, were now fighting an enemy in their own minds as much as they were fighting the humans. Every time they thought they had found a way forward, they were met with another ambush, another trap. The galactic commanders, still aboard their ships, grew increasingly frustrated. They couldn't understand why their superior forces were failing. The jungle was supposed to be a mere obstacle, nothing more. But now, their troops were sending out distress signals, and casualties were mounting at an alarming rate. Every attempt to rally their forces was met with silence or garbled communications. The jungle was swallowing their soldiers whole, and the commanders, for all their strategic prowess, could do nothing but watch in growing disbelief. As the days wore on, the galactic soldiers began to turn on each other. Accusations flew, as fear bred mistrust. Some claimed that the humans were using dark technology, while others swore that the jungle itself was alive, working with the humans to destroy them. Discipline, once the backbone of their military, started to crack. Soldiers who had never known defeat were now questioning their purpose, their leadership, and their survival. The special forces understood that they had already won the mental battle. The galactic forces were broken, and it was only a matter of time before they fell completely. But the humans didn't rush. They continued their slow, methodical attacks, wearing down the alien soldiers bit by bit. Every night the galactic forces slept with one eye open, knowing that at any moment, the jungle might claim more of their own. Exhaustion, fear, and the relentless pressure of the unseen enemy took its toll. The psychological toll became the galactic army's undoing. Soldiers began abandoning their posts, wandering aimlessly through the jungle, hoping to find a way out. Others, too scared to move, simply froze in place, waiting for death to find them. The commanders, still trying to maintain control, barked orders into malfunctioning comms, but their voices could no longer reach their soldiers. The jungle, and the humans who had mastered it, had turned the Galactic Army's greatest strength, their unity and discipline, into their greatest weakness. It was no longer a battle of guns and bombs, it was a battle of minds, and the Galactic forces had lost. The wilderness, with its unpredictability and danger, had broken them in ways their technology could never fix. The Galactic forces were in shambles. What had begun as an assured conquest had turned into a desperate struggle for survival. The commanders, still clinging to their belief in the superiority of their technology, ordered their remaining troops to regroup for a final push. But it was too late. The once cohesive army was now fragmented, with units scattered across the jungle, many of them out of contact or too terrified to move. Panic had taken hold, and the soldiers, once confident in their invincibility, now saw every shadow as a threat, every sound as the approach of death. The special forces knew the end was near. The Galactic soldiers had been ground down to their breaking point, their morale shattered. Now, it was time to finish them. In silence, the human soldiers positioned themselves for the final assault. Every move was precise, calculated. They didn't need overwhelming numbers or superior firepower. They had the jungle, their training, and their determination. The Galactic forces, despite their advanced weapons, were at their mercy. The humans struck with brutal efficiency. Alien squads, already disoriented and on edge, found themselves surrounded. The Galactic soldiers, used to fighting in open spaces and relying on superior firepower, were now reduced to close-quarters combat, something for which they were woefully unprepared. The exosuits, designed to enhance movement and strength, became liabilities in the dense jungle, restricting their ability to maneuver. In the confusion, many of them fired blindly into the trees, hitting nothing but foliage and wasting precious energy reserves. In contrast, the special forces moved with purpose, using every inch of the terrain to their advantage. They were ghosts in the jungle, striking from the shadows, never giving the aliens a chance to regroup. The Galactic soldiers, already on the edge of collapse, began to fall apart completely. Some dropped their weapons and fled, hoping to escape the relentless assault. Others fought back, but their shots went wide, their movements erratic. They had lost the will to fight, and the humans could sense it. The commanders aboard the orbiting ships, now fully aware of the disaster unfolding below, tried to issue new orders. They called for airstrikes, for reinforcements, for anything that could salvage the situation. But it was all in vain. Their drones had long since been disabled, their air support rendered useless by the thick canopy of the jungle. The Galactic fleet, for all its power, was impotent in the face of a war fought on these terms. The humans had turned their greatest weakness, their lack of advanced technology, into their greatest strength. The final blow came not in the form of a grand battle, but in a series of small, devastating ambushes. The special forces didn't need to annihilate the entire Galactic army, they just needed to dismantle it, piece by piece. And that's exactly what they did. Every alien squad that tried to regroup was met with precise, devastating force. The Galactic soldiers, exhausted and demoralized, were picked off one by one, until there was nothing left of their once mighty force. In the end, only a handful of alien soldiers made it out of the jungle alive. They were the lucky ones, if they could even be called that. Broken and terrified, they stumbled back to their dropships, leaving behind their dead and their equipment. The jungle, which they had once mocked, had swallowed them whole, leaving only the human soldiers standing. As the dropships lifted off, the few surviving Galactic soldiers looked down at the jungle below, no longer seeing it as a primitive, untamed wilderness, but as a battlefield they could never hope to understand or control. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, but what they had found was something far more dangerous, a species that refused to be conquered, a planet that fought back, and soldiers who understood that the most advanced technology in the galaxy was useless without the will to survive. The Galactic commanders, forced to retreat in disgrace, would later try to explain their defeat, They would blame the terrain, the unpredictability of the jungle, the failures of their equipment. But deep down, they knew the truth. They hadn't just been defeated by the humans. They had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and outlasted. Their arrogance had been their undoing. On the ground, the special forces watched as the last of the alien ships disappeared into the sky. They were tired, their bodies bruised and battered, but they stood tall. They had defended their home, their planet, against an enemy far more powerful than they were. And they had won. The jungle was quiet now, the echoes of battle fading into the distance. The humans, victorious, melted back into the wilderness, leaving no trace of the war that had just been fought. The galactic forces, once so sure of their superiority, had learned a harsh lesson: Earth's wilderness was not to be taken lightly, and neither were its defenders.